if we subsequently want this question, we'll have it. So
Because you're talking about running different versions of Endnote. Is it
Mm.
possible to run different versions of Endnote on the one device? Or
I have it. I don't know because sometimes I've seen it work and sometimes I haven't. Most of the time, when I install a new version of Endnote, it uninstalls the previous version. So
yeah, it's funny on my iMac, on my personal iMac, I've
yeah.
managed to, I've got X8, X9, and 20.
Mm.
Like when I've
Upgraded and not
installed
removed
the
the old
new
one.
one, it hasn't gotten rid of the old one. But I
Yeah,
was too nervous to sort of do it on my work device when I was teaching Endnote last week in
yeah,
case it got rid of X9,
yeah. And
which was, yeah.
it tends to gum up when you actually get to site while you write, for example. Sometimes it won't know which one it's looking
Oh,
at. So I've just
yeah.
seen issues like that. So um, uninstall the one you're done with. But see, I've been using X9 on my personal Mac, um, waiting for this session so that I can say, okay, we're done with X9 now, and I can move on to 20. But I needed to have a version that I could bring up. So, okay, so just by way of background, for because I think most people, this is a pretty good indicator of the number of people who've registered. This is going to be really, really quick because all I want to take people through is just what are the main changes, because they're mostly cosmetic between X9 and 20, but just to give people an opportunity to have a look at what those changes are, and see that it's actually not that huge a deal. So upgrading from one to the other is not going to be the traumatic experience that major upgrades in EndNote sometimes seems to be. But the way I was thinking of doing that was I'm going to share my screen from old EndNote, show you through a couple of the key features, and then share my screen with new EndNote so you can have a look at that. And then I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the EndNote app, but I've not before shared the Endnote app because it's always been a pain to do with Zoom. So what I think I might do as well is share that to show you what the Endnote app on like a tablet looks like on an iPad or an Android tablet, just as a way to fill it out. And then we'll just take any questions. How does that sound for everybody? Great. Okay, so I'm gonna like my face turns away as I go over to share X9 just quickly. Now, just one thing to be mindful of is that I use dark mode on my computer, so everything you'll see here will be dark. But what you'll mainly notice in a normal EndNote library is you'll have, your big. Most of this would be grey for anybody else. You're all familiar with what X9 looks like, but this is X9 at the moment. Whether or not you have these two side windows that are on the right here, along the bottom of the screen, whatever. And then you've got your buttons across the top there for um, controlling different features of EndNote. So probably, and then your groups down the side here, right? So this is just by way of familiarizing you with what it looks like at the moment. And then the other thing to keep in mind is with your menus, we've got now this is on a Mac, obviously, but on a PC, the main difference is you don't have an Endnote X9. I might share the whole screen so that you're getting the menu up the top there. So what you'll have at the top is in a Mac, you'll have your Endnote X9 menu. That hasn't changed between X9 and 20. In a PC, basically what you're looking for is that preferences option, which lives under the edit menu there. But we've got here like output styles under edit, references. So there's a whole bunch of options for like finding duplicates and stuff with references under the references menu. Under groups here, all our instructions for controlling groups. And then under tools, we've got some of their cooler features that I think are underutilized, which I'll talk about in a second and explain some of those. And then you've got your window controls there, right? X9, we're pretty familiar with that. Let me jump over here and I'll share EndNote 20. So EndNote 20, I think a fair few people have probably used. So the immediate most obvious thing is that a whole bunch of those controls have dropped off from the top of the screen. So they've really simplified this and cut it back to these few here. So the first is insert citation. So if you were to select a citation in your library, you'd be able to insert that into a document per the cite while you write function. The next one is add a new reference. So they've just made that icon bigger, but it's the same icon basically that lived in the old EndNote. The next one is share a group. So you notice that's grayed out. And the other thing to bear in mind with all these buttons is they'll be grayed out because they're contextual, it doesn't make sense. So if I jump over to my left-hand column here, and I were to choose, for example, let's say this one here, once I've selected a group, I then get the option to share that group with people. I've also got this export references to another file or library button. Search the web for full text. That's the find full text option. So if I were to select that there, find full text becomes available. And then we've got create a Web of Science citation report. So they've integrated, because of the purchase, like the association between Clarivate and Endnote, they're creating more and more deep integration with some of Web of Science's tools. One of those tools that you might be familiar with is Manuscript Matcher, which is a really awesome, powerful tool for people who are working maybe on a journal article, and they can use Manuscript Matcher to basically search for journals that they might publish that in. So it has the looks at the citations, the references that are being used in the article, looks at the abstract, looks at the title of the article, and it recommends a couple of journals. And I've run this tool a couple of times just to, like on a couple of papers that I've been working on, to see what are the journals that it's suggesting, how good are the suggestions, and they're quite good. As long as the journal's indexed in Web of Science, which a large number are, occasionally it might miss maybe one, but otherwise it's pretty good. It gives you like a percentage recommended match, which is pretty awesome. And Kanchana's just pointing out here, and Kanchana, feel free to jump in here as well, because you're more familiar with the Windows version than I am, but Kanchana's pointing out there's no site icon in the Windows version, so this only lives in Mac. Let me just jump back there. Now across the top here, so same menu as before with your Mac, so you've got your EndNote menu and preferences, which lives under Edit on a PC. Under the references menu here, you'll notice that find duplicates has dropped out of this menu. So duplicates has moved. So we've got a whole bunch of editing options dealing with a particular reference in your library. Then we've got our group options here. So if we want to make edits to a group, and there's that create citation report and our manuscript matcher tool. So if I were to highlight a set of references, so I might just jump down here, I can click manuscript matcher, and that'll run that online tool. And that's also useful because you'll end up, if you're editing a document, which I'll show you, the document becomes visible in this left-hand column, same as it does in X9, and you can highlight that document and select Manuscript Matcher. Your library controls is where the sync button has moved. So instead of having a sync button here, which is what you might have had previously on EndNote, that now lives under the library menu. So just think of it as your sort of three broad levels of control. You've got references level, which is the most basic unit in an EndNote library, your group level, where you're starting to group and organize references, and then the whole library level, which is where you'd start to see things at a very top level in your library, and that includes the sync option. That also lives under the sync status menu over the side here, which you'll notice has moved from about the fourth item down to the very top of your left-hand column. So sync has moved in there, is a pretty major change. And then when you jump over to tools here, this is where you have your connection filters and stuff like that. I thought duplicate references would have done to tools. Maybe I've missed it.
Was under library, the find duplicates.
Yep, there it is, find duplicates. So find duplicates, again, you select your all references and that'll search across your whole library. And then you've got tools here. So they've got this is replaced with Copernia, whatever the stupid tool was called, the EndNote browser extension, your output files and connection filters and so on. And then you've got the other thing, and this is probably the major design change in EndNote, is that, and Katie's just asked, Kanchana, maybe you want to explain this one. Katie's just asked, what do you mean by there's no site icon in Windows?
I'm just typing, Pat.
Oh, okay, cool. And so over on the, and I'll read it out once it comes through the chat. The major change is to this right-hand window over here. So there's three modes that EndNote will populate. The first is the summary. So I'm just going to select a reference so we can see what this looks like. Just moving some. Let's grab that one. So we've got the summary tab initially. And what you'll find on this tab, it just says very big overview. What's the title of the article? Are there any PDFs attached to it? And then some of the bibliographic details. by default, this menu down the bottom here, and I've had a few people ask this who have started using Endnote 20. If you want to see a preview of the citation, you actually have to go down to the bottom of the summary tab and tap that little up button, and that will make the preview appear here. And then you can just select your citation style that you want to see. And you can either insert that directly into a document or hit copy to copy that citation. The edit tab is where you can make all of your edits to your reference. So you can select the journal type, most of the, the reference type. And most of this is the same as it was previously in Endnote X9. And the last is the PDF tab. So this is probably a little bit richer than it used to be. So you can actually do some of your annotations in here. So drop down your annotation toolbar if you wanted to work on this crazy tiny little thing. But of course you can press that button there to open your PDFs into Endnote's window. And then your annotation toolbar lives just here. So you can tap that and go through and, highlight, leave sticky notes, underline as you see fit on a particular reference in your library. Hit save and you can close that one. So that I think that is basically the major changes between old Endnote and new Endnote. One of the things we have been looking at, Kantra and I have been exploring, I was just testing it out today. Since the change to Alma, the find full text, so the library system, we no longer use what's called serial solutions. So I don't know if you remember, there used to be an old complicated URL in the find full text menu. This has been changed to something much more simple, but that's been updated by ICT. So when Endnote 20 gets installed on anybody's computer, it will automatically update with that new URL. So if you've installed Endnote 20 much earlier, you might need to go in and change that. So find full text works for you. But otherwise, most of the other functions in Endnote work exactly the same. So the key thing, I think, for orienting yourself in Endnote is understanding this sort of 3-tabbed option on the side here. So the summary tab, which I kind of find pretty useless. The edit tab, where you can actually make changes, but otherwise all those fields are exactly the same. And then the PDF tab, where you can, if you want, open your PDF in Adobe Acrobat, if you wanted to use that instead of Endnote's inbuilt one. And then you've got obviously the open for full edit there. Your sync status page is the same as it always has been. It's just moved up on the side here. So this will show you what your Endnote library looks like. You can refresh it or hit sync there to make all your changes between Endnote and the cloud. Yeah. Are there any questions so far? Or should I jump over to Endnote for iPad? Celia, you're unmuted.
Pat,
Yes. Oh, no, let Kanchana go first.
okay,
Yeah, Kanchana.
Pat, I just double checked the recent update and Endnote icon put it back again. So it's a good news. I know there's a lot of complaint came through because I still using the really testing mode one. I should update my one now. Yes, it's there.
Okay, so that site button.
Site value, the icon is still now there. So I just double check that information. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the major changes between Endnote X9 and X20 and Endnote 20 is that they removed even more of the differences between the Mac version and the PC version. So what you're seeing over time is just massive alignment between the two. So there is almost no difference, with the exception of the location of the preferences menu and the ability to run customizer. As far as like little things like how libraries are stored on computers, so with your Endnote package file and your data folder, those are exactly the same. So your Endnote library will still have an associated data folder, whether you're using, on either device. That all looks exactly the same. Cite while you write in Word looks exactly the same. It just says Endnote 20. So there really are very small differences in terms of how it's stored. There's just a few cosmetic changes with Endnote 20 itself. It's way faster and way more stable than X9. At least that's been my experience so far, where X9 can be a little bit gluggy over time to do things, particularly if you're dealing with a large library. Endnote 20 is much zippier on a computer. One thing that I should mention as well is that Endnote is, I'll share my screen for this one. Every now and again, we come across this, and that's the good old Endnote in-app browser searchy function. So you'll notice that Endnote's actually, on Endnote 9, there used to be a button up here that would allow people to sort of browse by web, online search. These functions don't really work because they depend on a connection file that Endnote, like to enable Endnote to connect to the University of Sydney's database subscriptions. That connection file hasn't been updated in like a decade, so it doesn't work anymore. But that feature of Endnote just isn't as fully featured as using the library's databases directly. So I think Endnote is slowly looking to retire that because they just don't want to be able to. I mean, if I were Clarivate, I wouldn't want to maintain those files for every university out there using whatever system they're using. So while it still exists, they're sort of downplaying its salience in the user interface. So just be mindful of that. Rosie.
Pat, with the configure find full text, could you put the links in the chat, please? Because on the website, under your troubleshooting in Endnote, it's still the old ones for serial solution. And
we only discovered this a week ago.
Right.
So I'm going to update the guide, but we just wanted to check this first. But I'll put the new chat in there. The only one that needs to be updated is the top part, which is, let me just bring up preferences, which is the open URL path. The authentication is exactly the same. So it's still going through the library's easy proxy. So this is unlikely to be a problem to anyone installing Endnote from today onwards because ICT has already updated these details in the package. It's only if you sort of had an early upgrade to Endnote 20.
Is the easy proxy though still HTTP? That seems really unlikely.
I mean, it won't make a difference practically. So you can make, if you want to put HTTPS or HTTP, it will still go through either way. So yeah.
My question was just a layout question in that in the in the previous versions, you could there was that little layout button on a Mac. I think it was the top right. On the PC, it was the bottom right.
Yeah.
Where you could change the layout as you wanted it, but that seems to have gone in 20. Is that right?
That's right. It's gone. Yeah.
Bastards.
They sort of move towards like how can we streamline as much as possible on the thing, so the layout flexibility, which is again something that's going to be an adapty thing. So there are a few things, and like I said, it's cosmetic, but there are a few things where people are just going to have to get used to where things have moved to. And when they were announcing it, so I went to it shows how long we've taken to get it released, but when I went to their sort of roadshow a year and a bit ago when they were announcing the software, they were really upfront about the fact that they're removing features from it. They just said, look, there's so many things built in here that are glugging it up that hardly anybody uses, that don't really make sense anymore given the way people use the software. So they are quite honest about removing certain things. So sometimes things have moved around, but some things are gradually disappearing. Oh yeah, question.
There's just a small thing. I just to confirm that when you want to edit, you can't double click on a reference anymore.
You can still on the
side.
You can still double click. Yeah. The reason I sort of showed the side thing is that it's just easier to get the hang of using that sidebar since it lives there. I mean, you can make it hide. Try right clicking it and click open. Katie, you should be able to edit. Oh, it doesn't let you edit reference.
It doesn't say. Oh, okay. Open a new tab. I can do it, but that doesn't do it.
Maybe it just
opens a new tab at the top. It doesn't open a little pop-up like it used to for me. I don't know.
So that's going to be the right-hand column as well. So
yeah, it's not working. Like you can't open up and go to the record in a full screen anymore.
Yeah. So just use that right-hand side
the edit
tab
option. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was looking when I was first trying to figure it out. I had a question from a student and their right bar was missing, I think, and I was trying to double click. And I thought I looked it up and it said it should work, but then it didn't work for me either, and everything else seemed to be fine. So
if they're finding the right bar missing, because it's where are we here? Because it's draggy for how large it gets, but you can actually make it disappear completely. And if that's gone, then it's going to make editing a bit of a pest. So just have it live in there, your summary, edit, and your PDF tabs. Make all your changes.
I had the issue where I closed that. There's a cross there in the top right-hand corner of that. Yeah, and you can actually close that window. And then I was like, I couldn't get it back. I was freaking out. But then when you click on the
double click and it pops up.
then it does come back.
Should I bring up the iPad app so people can have a bit of a gander at what that looks like?
Can I just ask you a question, Pat? About,
Yeah, of course.
It's probably my stupidity, but I'm using the new 20, but I can't. I'm having difficulty when I'm trying to put it into Word. When I want to sort of change it so that I just have a page, the author and the page number. I'm having trouble doing that, like adjusting it to sort of put, say for example, if it was like Fook page 44.
It would depend mainly on the citation style that you're using. So if, for example, you were using MLA, like a citation style that's like surname page number, I would assume that when you're inserting that, is that which style are you using to insert?
Well, that's what, maybe that's the problem.
Because those formatting issues are generally governed by the citation style that you've got selected. And let me bring up.
Where do I find the citation style?
So if you're in a Word document, so you can see my screen now, yeah?
Yeah.
So if you're in a Word document, you've got your Endnote 20 menu here. Then you select whichever style you're working with there. Now, if, let's go. Now, there's two ways you can add a citation. One is to hit Insert Citation in the document, which is generally the approach that I would take. But if you were sort of living in your EndNote menu here, you can also hit this button and that will insert that citation. And I foolishly had that text highlighted, which deleted it. So I'll just jump back over here and hit Insert Citation. So if that's not formatting the way I want it to format, I can just update the citation style to shift how it will appear. So it depends whether you want page numbers or not, really depends on whether or not it's a page numbered style like MLA, for example.
Yeah, but when I go to put it in, like if I try to adjust it, it won't let me adjust it.
So when you right click it, do you get this edit citation option?
Ah, right. Okay.
Yeah. So with page numbered styles, you'll need to click edit citation and make those changes using the more option, because it'll ask you for a little bit more detail at the bottom there.
Yeah, I think I did that. And then what do you do?
Just pop in the page number in there and hit OK. And that should take care of it.
Okay.
Let me see if MLA is in here.
Is this the same on PC as it is on Mac?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll play around with it.
Yeah, or flick me an email if it's giving you grief and it's not MLA style, because then we'll need to figure out what's going on there. So
yeah, okay. I'll have a play with it. Thank you.
Now I'm just going to share my iPad screen so that we can just have a quick look, just a quick tour of the iPad app, because I know a lot of people haven't seen these before. I'm really interested to see whether or not this screen share will work. Hey, look at that. Oh. Opening up a whole new world of teaching about EndNote. So this is what the EndNote Ipad app looks like. So you've got basically everything's managed by this drop-down menu. So at the very top left of the screen here, you've got a little circle button that you can tap, which will trigger the sync. So you need to be signed into Endnote Sync in order for EndNote with iPad to work. So you've got your preferences menu here. You just sign in with your EndNote account. Choose whether you want, the most important thing is whether you want offline attachment access. So that's whether or not you want it to automatically download all of the attachments out of your EndNote library. I have that switched off because you can end up with a really, really large number of PDFs downloading onto your iPad. But what you can do is specify particular folders that you want to have permanently downloaded. So for example, if I favorite a particular reading or there's particular projects that I might be working on, I can actually switch on offline attachment access. So we'll automatically download all the PDFs into my iPad so that I can access them wherever I am. And then if I jump in here with my EndNote library, I can sort of scroll through and see groups. Now, if you're using smart groups, these will not sync into the iPad. So here's a project that Jess and I are working on, for example. So I want to make sure I've got all of these readings available for me to read offline. So I can tap through here and you tap on a particular reading. The best part about it is obviously being able to open up the full text PDF. And then you can scroll through And here we've got sort of, I'm going to tap that button up there. We've got our Annotate menu on the side here. So I can choose where I want to, you know, highlight text, write text, underline. If I need to erase any changes that I've made, you've got that eraser underneath that. If I want to drop a sticky note onto the screen, I can do that by tapping on the screen there, and add any feedback that I've got, like, or thoughts on the way through, and all that becomes searchable. Rosie.
Pat, I think I've asked you this before, but I've forgotten the answer anyway, so I'll ask again. And that is, if you have an iPad, but the substantive EndNote that you use is on a PC, can you still sync to, like,
yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you can. There's really no problem with having.
It's all through, and just like if you've got, it's the same as if you've got a Mac. For one computer, like say your work computer is a Mac and your home computer is a PC. Well, why would anybody do that? If your home computer is a Mac and your work computer is a PC, you might be able to, you can sync between those. So as long as you're using Endnote Sync, and it's the same with iPad or an Android or anything like that. The key is having your Endnote Sync account set up, and then once that's up and running, away you go.
Thanks.
So yeah, it's absolutely, for me, it's just been a revelation being able to do this over the past couple of years. Because you can just sort of go through, mark up, leave your thoughts, scribble all over it if you need to. And then once you're done, you just trigger the sync again and it saves those changes into the cloud. And then you can open any of those notes or open any of those annotations on your, you know, your desktop, wherever you're looking at it. And, you know, I mean, there is also an iPad app for phones. Sorry, like the app is available on phones as well. But it would just be so fiddly and small to work with a PDF that I don't know why anybody would do it, but also an option. That's half an hour. That's the tour that I had for you. Are there any questions?
I actually have a question just around upgrading, and this sort of relates more to people that are kind of working on systematic reviews. What is our consensus around whether or not to update if we've got
at this point, I would start encouraging people to update to 20. But also I think with the systematic review, the main issue I would have is if they're getting to, it's like any project, if you're getting to crunch time, I would probably hold off just because they're used to it. But it's like, you know, if it was a PhD student who was in the last 6 months, I'd probably say don't bother upgrading. Like, you're just in too critical a period. With a systematic review, if people are just setting out doing their searches or whatever, I would probably encourage them to upgrade. If they've got things in the position where they're about to send them to Covidence or whatever, then maybe I would hold off until it was in another system and you didn't have to deal with it. So it really depends on where they're at in the process. But if someone's just starting to set out on it, get them to upgrade first.
But also the type of the project, you know, if you see that the client is, you know, not tech savvy and struggles with things as is, or if you're working on a rapid review, or if you know, or if you're working with a team of multiple people who all work on different devices, like, that's just a layer of complication that you probably wouldn't want in a project.
Yeah, the thing to keep in mind is that 20 is more stable and works faster, right?
Yeah.
So it does actually avoid a whole lot. Like, if you're starting out on a project, it's better to get used to the more stable, quicker, less gluggy software, because down the line, it's going to work out better for people. The other thing is that Endnote 20 adds the ability to collaborate with up to 200. I mean, like, who's going to be doing that? But you can share a library with up to 200 people. So I don't know, there might be a larger research group or something like that that's available. So swings and roundabouts. But I would encourage people to upgrade as soon as practical. It's just if they're in a crunch period with research, rather than risk it, just stick with what they're familiar. But outside of that, go for it.
Thank you.
And do we envisage that we'll start teaching X20 as of next year, or?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we'll switch to 20. So for library staff, I would recommend upgrading once this current run of classes is done. I would say upgrade to 20 just to start playing around with it and getting used to it. But yeah, we'll definitely be switching to 20 from next year. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pat.
Thank you. Thanks for coming along, everyone. And I'll make this recording available somehow. I'll figure that out.
Thank you.
All right. See you
Thanks
later.
very much.
Bye.
Bye.